Dr. J. Kim stood before a wall of complex screens, his eyes reflecting lines of calculations that would have looked like magic to most people. The Horizons Research Lab hummed with quiet intensity. Outside the ship's windows, stars burned in the endless darkness of space. "We found it," he said softly to Commander Hyun Park. The Krality home system was more than just a collection of planets. It was a carefully balanced astronomical system, with a primary star that had sustained their civilization for millions of years. And now, that star was about to become their greatest weakness. Some men approached, carrying a data pad filled with complex gravitational calculations. "The resonance patterns are perfect," he reported. What the humans had discovered was nothing short of extraordinary. Every star has a delicate balance of internal forces: gravity, nuclear reactions, magnetic fields. These forces keep a star stable, but they can also be manipulated. The Krality believed their technology was advanced. They had no idea how little they truly understood about stellar mechanics. Dr. Kim began to input a series of precise calculations. Each number was carefully chosen, each algorithm designed to create the most microscopic of changes. To the Krality, these changes would be invisible. "Quantum wave generators are ready," some men announced. Commander Park watched carefully. This was more than just an attack. This was a precise scientific operation. They weren't destroying the star. They were changing it, slowly and carefully. Vorak, the junior Krality scientist who had been watching the humans, would have been amazed if he could see what was happening. The humans were about to demonstrate a level of scientific understanding that went beyond simple destruction. The first changes were so small that no normal instrument could detect them. Deep within the Krality home star, quantum-level interactions began to shift. Nuclear fusion processes started to change, almost imperceptibly. Gravitational wave generators at 32%, some men reported. Dr. Kim nodded. Increased to 45%. The star began to respond. Its internal structure started to change in ways that would take years to become fully visible, but the process had begun. Tiny fluctuations in nuclear reactions, slight shifts in magnetic fields, changes so small that they would go unnoticed for months. "We're not destroying," Dr. Kim explained to Commander Park. "We're changing. Slowly, carefully." The humans had learned something important. Total destruction was not the goal. Demonstration was. Commander Park understood perfectly. This was about showing the Krality that humans were not to be underestimated. That a species they had called primitive could understand and manipulate fundamental astronomical processes. "How long?" she asked. "Months," Dr. Kim responded. "Maybe a year. The star will slowly become unstable, but so slowly that they won't understand what's happening until it's too late." Outside the ship, space remained quiet, but something fundamental was changing. A star was being reshaped, quantum wave by quantum wave. The Krality had called humans apes. Now, those apes were about to show them the true meaning of scientific capability. Vorak would have been terrified if he knew. The humans were not just fighting. They were teaching a lesson that would echo through the galaxy. The diplomatic ship hung in space like a gleaming metal whale, its hull reflecting the distant starlight. Inside, Commander Hyun Park walked carefully, her steps measured and calm. She knew every movement, every word would be analyzed by the Krality observers. Around her, the ship's interior was a strange mix of human and alien design. Smooth metal walls with intricate alien patterns were interrupted by simple human touchscreens and practical equipment. It was a perfect metaphor for the meeting about to take place. Some men stood behind her, holding a data pad with carefully prepared cultural information. Dr. Jai Kim was already inside the main conference room, setting up their presentation. The Krality delegation arrived with typical arrogance. They moved like they owned the space, their blue skin shifting with patterns that seemed to communicate emotions humans could barely understand. The lead diplomat, Krelax, was especially imposing. His body was larger than the others, with silver markings that suggested high rank among his people. "Humans," Krelax began, his translated voice dripping with condescension. "We have reviewed your cultural records. Your history is nothing but a series of violent conflicts." Commander Park remained calm. "Every species has a complex history," she responded. "We are more than our past conflicts." Vorak, the junior scientist who had been observing the humans, stood to the side. He was different from the other Kraltai. Where they saw weakness, he saw potential. Dr. Kim began their presentation. It wasn't about military achievements or technological prowess. Instead, he showed something unexpected: human art, music, scientific discoveries, and moments of collective human kindness. A holographic display came to life, showing images that made the Kralti delegation pause. There were pictures of people helping each other after natural disasters, artwork that captured complex human emotions, scientific discoveries that showed human curiosity and compassion. One image showed a group of doctors working in a difficult area, treating people from different backgrounds. Another showed children from different parts of the world studying together. A third displayed a team of scientists collaborating across national boundaries to solve a global problem. Krelax looked confused. "These are propaganda images," he declared. "They cannot represent true reality." But Vorak watched carefully. These images were different from the carefully controlled propaganda of the Kralti Empire. They seemed genuine. Dr. Kim spoke softly. "These are not staged images. These are moments of real human connection. We are not perfect, but we are capable of great compassion." The Kralti delegation whispered among themselves. Their empire was built on conquest, on the idea that stronger species had the right to control weaker ones. The idea of cooperation was alien to them. Commander Park noticed something interesting. Vorak was the only one looking at the images with genuine curiosity. While the other Kralti dismissed the presentation, he seemed to be studying it carefully. "Our history is complex," Park continued, "but so is our potential for growth and understanding." Sung Min watched the diplomatic dance carefully. He knew they were doing more than just presenting information. They were providing a carefully crafted message about human potential. The Kralti continued to mock, but something was changing. Vorak's curiosity was a small crack in their armor of superiority, and the humans knew that cracks, no matter how small, could eventually break entire systems. As the presentation ended, the diplomatic tension remained, but something had shifted. The Kralti had seen something they couldn't easily dismiss, a glimpse of human complexity that didn't fit their simple narrative of a primitive species. Vorak looked at Commander Park. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and in that moment, he understood that humans were far more than the apes his people believed them to be. Space was quiet. The horizon drifted like a silent witness to the final moments of the Kralti civilization. Commander Hyun Park stood on the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back. Dr. Jai Kim sat at the main computer station, watching the final data streams. Sung Min monitored the communication channels. "Transmission ready," Sung Min announced. The Kralti home system was dying. Their star, once a symbol of their power, now burned with an unstable, angry light. Planetary systems collapsed. Millions of Kralti were evacuating, their mighty civilization reduced to scattered refugee ships. Vorak was among the survivors. He had been the only one who saw the truth early enough to escape. Commander Park nodded to Dr. Kim. "Send the message." A single transmission began to broadcast across all Kralti communication frequencies. It was simple, direct, powerful. "You called us apes," the message read. "We call this justice." The words hung in space like a final judgment. Vorak watched from a refugee ship. He understood now what the humans had done. This was not just revenge. This was a demonstration, a lesson about respect, about understanding, about the danger of underestimation. The horizon began to move, slowly, deliberately, like a predator that had completed its hunt. "We could have destroyed them completely," Dr. Kim said quietly. "But that's not the point." Commander Park understood perfectly. The goal was not total destruction. The goal was to show the galaxy what happens when a species is consistently underestimated. Some men looked up from his station. "Multiple alien civilizations are receiving our transmission," he reported. The message was clear. Humans were not to be trifled with. Vorak thought about all the times his people had laughed at humans, called them primitive, considered them nothing more than advanced apes. Now those apes had dismantled an entire civilization with nothing more than scientific understanding and careful planning. The cruelty star continued to burn. Its light was changing, becoming something different, something unstable. "We're not killers," Commander Park said. "We're teachers." Dr. Kim nodded. The transmission continued. The message of what happened to those who underestimate humanity spread across the galaxy. On the refugee ships, Krelty looked at each other in shock. Their mighty civilization reduced to scattered survivors, all because they had been too arrogant to recognize the potential of another species. The horizon moved away, silent, precise, powerful. Vorak watched the dying star. He understood now. Humanity was not what the Krelty had believed. They were something else entirely. Something far more dangerous. A species that could think, adapt, learn, overcome. The stars bore witness to the fall of an empire destroyed not by weapons, but by a lesson in respect. And somewhere in the darkness of space, humanity continued to explore, to learn, to grow. The message was sent. The lesson was clear. Do not call humans apes. The diplomatic hall was silent. Tension filled the air like thick smoke, making it hard to breathe. Krelax, the Krelty lead diplomat, stood with his full height, his blue skin rippling with angry patterns that told of his growing frustration. "Humans are nothing," he suddenly shouted, his translated voice echoing through the chamber. "You are violent children playing with technologies you cannot understand. Your entire species is a mistake of evolution, a brief accident in the grand design of the universe." Dr. Jae Kim stood perfectly still. Commander Hyun Park remained calm, her eyes never leaving the alien diplomat. Some men, standing just behind them, felt his hands clench into tight fists. The insult was deliberate. The Krelty had been building to this moment for weeks. Their diplomatic meetings had been a slow dance of increasing aggression, each interaction more hostile than the last. They believed humans were inferior, and they wanted to make that perfectly clear. "Your species has done nothing but fight," Krelax continued. "Look at your history. War after war, destruction after destruction. You call yourselves civilized, but you are nothing more than advanced apes with delusions of grandeur." Vorak, the junior scientist who had been observing the humans, felt uncomfortable. Something about this attack seemed unnecessary. He watched Commander Park carefully, wondering how she would respond. Commander Park took a single step forward. Her movement was slow, calculated. "We are not perfect," she said quietly, her voice somehow carrying across the entire room. "But we learn, we grow, we adapt." Krelax laughed. It was a harsh sound that seemed to mock the very idea of human potential. "Adapt. You cannot even understand the basic technologies we use every day. Your quantum computing is primitive. Your space travel is limited. Your understanding of the universe is like a child trying to understand complex mathematics." Dr. Kim exchanged a quick glance with Commander Park. Something was happening. This was more than just a diplomatic incident. This was a calculated provocation. Some men noticed a small light blinking on his communication device. A message was being transmitted, hidden within the background noise of the diplomatic exchange. To anyone else, it would look like simple system chatter. "Your species is a mistake," Krelax repeated. "A brief, unfortunate accident that will be forgotten by the universe." The words hung in the air, but beneath the words, something else was happening. The humans were collecting data. Every insult, every moment of aggression was being carefully recorded, analyzed, processed. Vorak watched closely. He saw something the other Krelty missed. The humans were not just listening. They were planning. Commander Park's response was simple. "We will remember this moment," she said quietly. The diplomatic meeting was about to end. But something had changed. The line had been crossed. The humans had been pushed to a point of no return. In the vast darkness of space, a plan was taking shape, a plan that would make the Kralti regret every single word they had spoken. Vorak felt a chill run down his spine. Something big was coming, and the Kralti had no idea what was about to happen. The humans had been underestimated for the last time. The first signs of trouble came slowly, so slowly that most Kralti scientists didn't notice. A small research station orbiting the homeworld recorded unusual solar activity. Magnetic readings showed strange fluctuations. Radiation levels began to change in ways that didn't make sense. Vorak was the first to sound the alarm. "The star is changing," he told his senior scientists. His blue skin rippled with worry, patterns of concern spreading across his body. Riltak laughed. "Changing? Impossible," he declared. "Our star has been stable for millions of years." But the changes were real. Deep within the star's core, quantum-level manipulations were taking effect. Nuclear fusion processes began to shift. Magnetic fields started to destabilize. To the Kralti, it looked like a natural phenomenon. They had no idea it was a carefully planned attack. On the horizon, Dr. J. Kim watched the data streams with cold precision. "Stage 3 is beginning," he told Commander Gun Park. The Kralti homeworld started to feel the first real effects. Temperature readings became unstable. Solar flares increased in frequency and intensity. What had been a steady, predictable star was now becoming unpredictable. Planetary defense systems began to activate, but they were looking in the wrong direction. The Kralti expected an external threat. They never imagined the threat was coming from within their own star. Vorak continued to collect data. He was the only one seeing the bigger picture. The star wasn't just changing. It was being systematically dismantled at a quantum level. "We need to evacuate," he tried to explain to his superiors. But they didn't listen. The Kralti believed in their own superiority too much to believe they could be vulnerable. Massive solar flares began to erupt, each one larger than the last. Planetary communication networks started to fail. Radiation levels increased dramatically. Commander Park watched the data with a calm that would have terrified the Kralti if they had seen it. "We're not destroying," Dr. Kim explained. "We're demonstrating." The star's internal structure was breaking down. Slowly, carefully. Each change was precise. Each modification calculated to create maximum impact with minimum direct intervention. Vorak realized the truth. This was not just an attack. This was a lesson. The Kralti had called humans primitive. They had mocked human technology. They had believed themselves to be superior in every way. Now they were going to learn differently. Planetary evacuation began, but it was too late. The star that had supported Kralti civilization for millions of years was dying, not in a sudden explosion, but in a slow, calculated breakdown that would take months to complete. Communication networks collapsed. Defense systems failed. The mighty Kralti civilization began to crumble. "How?" Riltak finally asked, looking at the failing systems. "How is this happening?" Vorak knew. The humans had done something extraordinary. They had shown that technological superiority was not about raw power. It was about understanding, about creativity, about seeing possibilities that others couldn't imagine. The star continued to change. Magnetic fields twisted. Radiation levels spiked. The Kralti homeworld began to die. And somewhere, in the darkness of space, the horizon watched. The humans had been called apes. Now those apes were unmaking an entire civilization. The first signs of trouble came quietly. A power grid in a distant Kralti colony flickered. A communication network in another sector dropped for 3 seconds. Most would have ignored these small glitches. But Vorak noticed. He sat in the central monitoring station, his blue skin shifting with patterns of worry. The other scientists continued their daily work, laughing and talking about human primitiveness. Vorak watched the screens carefully. "Something is wrong," he muttered to himself. In the main control room of the Kralty Central Command, alarms began to sound. Softly at first, then louder. Red warning lights started to pulse across massive screens filled with complex data streams. Riltak, the senior scientist who had repeatedly mocked humans, stood up. "What is happening?" he demanded. The systems were changing. Slowly, carefully, each network connection became a potential point of failure. Defense systems began to show unexpected vulnerabilities. Communication channels started to distort and break. Commander Hyun Park watched from the horizon. Dr. Jae Kim sat beside her, monitoring everything. "Stage 1 complete," Dr. Kim said quietly. The humans had done something extraordinary. They hadn't just entered the Kralty systems. They had become the systems. Their code moved like living things, changing and adapting faster than the Kralty could understand. Vorak tried to explain to his superiors. "We are being attacked," he said. "The humans are inside our networks." Krelax, the diplomatic leader, laughed. "Impossible," he declared. "Humans are too primitive. They could never breach our systems." But the breaches were happening everywhere. Power stations went offline. Communication networks collapsed. Defense systems began to show impossible vulnerabilities. What had seemed like unbreakable technology was now full of holes. The Kralty had one critical weakness. They believed in their own superiority so completely that they could not imagine being vulnerable. Dr. Kim's fingers moved across the computer screens. Each movement was calculated. Each line of code was a weapon. The humans were dismantling the Kralty civilization piece by piece, and the aliens didn't even realize it was happening. "How are they doing this?" Riltak shouted, looking at the failing systems. Vorak knew. He had seen it from the beginning. The humans were not just using technology. They were thinking differently. Each system was a puzzle to be solved, a challenge to be understood. The horizon continued to drift in space, looking like a simple research vessel. But it was so much more. It was the tip of a spear aimed directly at the heart of the Kralty civilization. Commander Park looked calm. Too calm. "Stage 2, Dr. Kim said. The systems continued to fall. Entire planetary networks went dark. Communication became impossible. The Kralty were being isolated, cut off from each other, their great civilization suddenly looking very fragile. Vorak watched in horror and fascination. The species that had been called primitive was showing a level of technological warfare that nobody had expected. "We underestimated them," he whispered. The humans were not just fighting. They were teaching a lesson about underestimation, a lesson about respect, and the Kralty were about to learn it the hard way. The vast darkness of space stretched out like an endless black ocean, dotted with pinpricks of distant starlight. The research vessel Horizon drifted quietly, its sleek hull reflecting the soft glow of distant stars. Inside the ship's bridge, Commander Hyun Park sat in her captain's chair, her fingers tapping a steady rhythm on the armrest. They had been mapping the outer reaches of the Orion Arm for months now, collecting data and exploring regions no human had ever seen before. The crew was a mix of scientists, explorers, and military personnel, each chosen for their unique skills and ability to work together under extreme conditions. Sung Min, the ship's primary communications officer, suddenly straightened in his seat. "Commander," he called out, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of the ship's systems, "we're picking up an unusual signal." Park leaned forward, her eyes sharp and focused. "On screen," she commanded. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a massive alien vessel. It was unlike anything humans had ever encountered before. The ship seemed to be constructed from multiple geometric shapes, its surface a mix of deep purple and metallic silver that seemed to shimmer and change as it moved. "Incoming transmission," Some men reported. The alien's face appeared on the screen. It was nothing like the humanoid aliens from old science fiction movies. The creature had deep blue skin with intricate silver patterns that moved like living tattoos. Its eyes were large and oval-shaped, set wide apart on a triangular head. When it spoke, its mouth didn't move in the way human mouths did, but a translated voice emerged from the ship's speakers. Unidentified vessel. The translation came through. You have entered restricted space of the Kralti Empire. State your purpose immediately. Commander Park remained calm. She had trained for first contact scenarios her entire career. This is Commander Hyun Park of the Earth research vessel Horizon. She responded clearly. We are on a peaceful scientific exploration mission. The alien's facial patterns shifted, creating what seemed like an expression of pure contempt. Another group of primitive explorers. The translation came through, each word dripping with disdain. Your species is barely out of its own solar system, and yet you dare to venture into advanced territories. Dr. J. Kim, the ship's lead scientist, stepped closer to the communication station. He knew diplomatic interactions could be delicate, especially during first contact scenarios. The aliens clearly saw humans as something inferior. We mean no harm, Dr. Kim interjected. We are simply exploring and seeking to understand the universe. The Kralti commander laughed, or what passed for a laugh in their species. It was a harsh, grating sound that made the ship's communication systems crackle. Understand the universe. You cannot even understand your own primitive planet. We have been observing your species. You are nothing more than advanced apes, playing with technologies you cannot comprehend. Some Nin's hands clenched into fists. The insult was clear, even through the translation. But Commander Park remained steady. Her years of training had prepared her for exactly this kind of situation. We are here peacefully, she repeated, her voice calm but firm. We wish to open a dialogue and learn. The alien's response was immediate and mocking. Learn? What could you possibly learn from a civilization millions of years more advanced than your own? You are children wandering into a room of complex machinery, touching things you cannot understand. Dr. Kim caught Commander Park's eye. There was something beneath the surface of this interaction. The Kralti were revealing more about themselves with each insulting statement, their arrogance, their belief in their own superiority. Little did the Kralti know, humans had a long history of turning underestimation into opportunity. And this first contact was about to become something the alien empire would never forget. As the communication channel remained open, tension filled the Horizon's bridge. First contact had just become much more interesting than any of them had expected. The Kralti research station hung in space like a massive metallic spider, its multiple arms stretching out in complex geometric patterns. Inside the central hub, a group of alien scientists gathered around a large holographic display, watching the data from their encounter with the human vessel. Vorak, a junior research scientist, stood slightly apart from the group. His skin patterns shifted nervously, a sign of internal conflict among his species. While the other scientists laughed and mocked the human technology, something about the data troubled him. Look at these primitive energy readings, one senior scientist named Riltak proclaimed, pointing at the holographic projection. Their power generation is barely above what we considered advanced technology 3,000 years ago. Another scientist, Krelna, nodded in agreement. They are like children playing with tools they do not understand. See how inefficient their data transfer protocols are. But Vorak saw something different. He noticed subtle patterns in the human data that seemed almost intentional. The inefficiencies weren't random. They looked calculated. Back on the horizon, Dr. J. Kim prepared for their first technological demonstration. Commander Park had agreed to share some of their research data with the Kralti, hoping to open a genuine dialogue of scientific exchange. Some men, Dr. Kim called to the communications officer, prepare the quantum computing simulation. We'll show them something interesting. The demonstration was simple on the surface. Dr. Kim began by sharing what appeared to be a basic algorithm for energy distribution. To the Krelty, it looked like a crude attempt at showing their technological capabilities. But Vorak watched carefully. The algorithm seemed inefficient at first glance. It appeared to waste energy, taking complex routes that made no logical sense. The Krelty scientists began to laugh, pointing out the obvious flaws in human technology. What they didn't realize was that Dr. Kim had embedded a series of nested quantum encryption protocols within the seemingly simple data transfer. Each inefficient route was actually a complex testing mechanism designed to probe the Krelty communication systems. In the research station, Vorak's eyes widened. He saw something the other scientists missed. The human data wasn't just a simple transfer, it was a sophisticated probe. "Stop," he tried to interject, but the other scientists were too busy mocking the human technology. The quantum algorithm began to do something unexpected. It started to map the Krelty network infrastructure, gathering information in ways that seemed impossible. Dr. Kim watched the data flow, a slight smile playing on his lips. To the Krelty, it looked like a failed demonstration. To the humans, it was a carefully planned first step. Sung Min leaned close to Dr. Kim. "Did it work?" he whispered. Dr. Kim nodded slightly. "Perfectly." Back in the research station, Vorak continued to watch the data. He was the only one who noticed the subtle changes, the way the human algorithm was doing something far more complex than anyone realized. "We are being studied," he muttered to himself, "and they want us to think we are the ones studying them." The Krelty continued to laugh and mock, completely unaware that with each moment of derision, they were revealing more about themselves than they could possibly imagine. The humans were patient, methodical, and far more intelligent than the aliens could comprehend. First contact was proving to be nothing like anyone had expected. Vorak looked at the data again. Something big was coming. He was sure of it. Deep in the Horizon's computer core, Dr. J. Kim worked with a calm precision that would have terrified the Krelty if they had understood what was happening. Lines of code danced across multiple screens, each movement carefully calculated. Sung Min watched over his shoulder. "Are you sure this will work?" he asked quietly. Dr. Kim's smile was cold. "Absolutely." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. The humans had spent years preparing for this moment, collecting data, building hidden systems, and creating pathways that the Krelty would never detect. What looked like simple communication protocols and basic data transfers were actually complex infiltration mechanisms. Commander Hyun Park entered the room, her eyes fixed on the screens. "Status?" she asked. "We're in," Dr. Kim responded. "Their entire network is more vulnerable than they realize." The Krelty believed their technological systems were impenetrable. They had conquered hundreds of species over thousands of years. Their arrogance had made them blind to their own weaknesses. Each piece of data the humans had shared during their diplomatic meetings was now a weapon. The quantum algorithms, the seemingly simple communication protocols, the research exchanges, all of them were carefully designed Trojan horses. Vorak, the junior Krelty scientist, sat in the research station's secondary monitoring room. Something felt wrong. The data streams looked different. The patterns were shifting in ways he couldn't explain. "Commander," he called out to his superior, "I'm seeing strange data anomalies." Riltak, the senior scientist, barely looked up. "Anomalies? From the humans? Impossible." But the anomalies were real. Tiny digital tendrils were spreading through the Krelty network. They moved like invisible threads, connecting systems, gathering information, creating backdoors that nobody could detect. Dr. Kim's fingers moved across the keyboard with surgical precision. "We're targeting their critical infrastructure," he explained to Commander Park. "Communication networks, power grids, defense systems. We're not destroying them. We're making them vulnerable." The humans weren't using traditional weapons. They were using something far more powerful: information and intelligent design. Some men watched the screens. Entire sections of the Krelty network were slowly changing color, indicating growing human access. What looked like normal system operations were actually complete digital infiltration. "They won't even know we're here," Dr. Kim said softly. In the Kralty research stations, warning systems began to flicker. But the warnings were so subtle, so carefully hidden, that most scientists ignored them. A power grid would show a momentary fluctuation. A communication channel would briefly distort. Nothing seemed seriously wrong. Vorak continued to watch. He was the only one seeing the bigger picture. The human infiltration was happening so slowly, so carefully that it was almost invisible. "We're being invaded," he tried to explain to his colleagues. But they laughed. "Humans? Invade their advanced systems? Impossible." Commander Park looked at Dr. Kim. "How long?" she asked. "Weeks," he responded. "Maybe months. We're not just entering their systems. We're understanding them, learning them, preparing." The silent invasion continued. The Kralty remained unaware that every moment, every data transfer, every communication was slowly giving humans complete access to their entire civilization. Vorak shivered. Something big was coming, and nobody was prepared for it.